Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Laurie Hammer, and I have with me today Dr. Anna Marie Frank. And Anna Marie is an open book, she says to me. So I'm excited to have this conversation. It's all going to be about the brain and how we think, how we live, how we believe affects everything from head to toe. So Anna Marie, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I would love to know, how did you come to this realization about the brain, and kind of what is your path? What's your journey been like?
Oh boy. So we got to go back a little bit. I actually struggled with depression in high school, which back then we didn't, I didn't really talk about it. It was just
Right.
something in me that was like, I'm not happy. I should be happy. I'm an athlete. I'm getting good grades. I have friends. But it was just like this thing inside of me. And then I thought, oh, once I go to college, this will go away. I go to college and it's even more rampant.
Hmm.
And then I graduated university, went on to my first job and said, okay, now I'm going to be happy. Now I'm going to feel better because I got the job. I moved across the country and I had health insurance, which I thought was cool. I no longer was struggling with my finances as much.
Right.
So you'd think some of that burden would come off, but I found myself in my early 20s really depressed. And I decided to go to a psychiatrist. So I go to the psychiatrist and spend a very little time with him. And before I knew it, I was on three mind-altering medications in my
Oh,
early
wow.
20s. Knowing what I know now, the brain isn't even fully developed till we're 25-ish.
Right.
So this is before my brain was fully developed. And what happened was I kept going back to have him change my medications to fix me because I thought that, oh, it's just a brain, quote unquote, brain chemistry
Right.
imbalance, which knowing now we have no way
We
to
know now that
measure.
it's not. Yep.
There's no such thing as brain chemistry that we can balance, or that we know to test it. And this last time I went back to him, I remember I was in the waiting room and I felt like the walls were just coming in on me.
Mhm.
And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. My appointment was 20, 30, 40 minutes had passed. And I'm just like, why? Like, I was growing more and more irritated. So then I get called in for my session. I go in, I sit down, and I notice, which is interesting. So this whole appointment, I'm noticing things I never noticed before
No.
for whatever reason. And I notice he doesn't even look at me. He just goes right to my chart and starts asking me, do you want to hurt yourself? Do you want to hurt other people? And like this list of questions. And then his phone rings. He gets out his phone, his flip phone, tells you how long ago it was. And he takes a call as if I'm not even there. And he has this full blown conversation. And I'm just sitting there. And I was so upset.
Wow.
My heart was beating so fast, and he got off the call and went straight back to the questioning as if he didn't even take a phone call. And I told him, I said, I don't appreciate you taking a call during our session. And it took every ounce of me to speak up for myself and say this.
Uh-huh.
And I remember he looked at me and was like, sorry. Like he wasn't even sorry at all. And
Wow.
I was like, just mortified. And I just stood up and said that I needed to go. And at that time, he pulled out my prescriptions and he had three prescriptions that he had already written for me before I even got there.
Before you even got there. Wow.
Mhm. So I walk out and I remember I took those prescriptions. There was like this like little gray trash can underneath where you check in, where they had the glass up. This is before COVID, by the way. So it's
Mhm.
like, you don't want to interact with us crazy people, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I just remember I threw those prescriptions in the trash. I stepped outside and it was like the trees were green for the first time. The sky
Wow.
was blue for the first time. And it was like, you are the only person that can make you happy. Like, wake up. So that was like the biggest pivotal point in my life. And I thought, well, if we can reprogram computers, I could reprogram my brain because I never felt so small and insignificant and just I just couldn't believe the amount of disrespect in that session. Meanwhile, they're charging like $500 or whatever it was
Right.
for a session. And so, yeah, so that was my biggest turning point. And then I had quite a few after that that helped shape to where I'm at today.
That is a huge turning point. And I hear that from so many people. Like, I went into this office And, they didn't really pay attention to me. All they wanted to do was write me a script, and I don't feel any better. And so,
Mhm.
people when they come to see me, clearly they're not coming for, seeking medication because they're wanting to get off their meds or they want a different pathway. And so I love the fact that you had that epiphany of just taking ownership of
Yeah.
of your health, of your mental health, or
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it. And I would love to get into that as well. Because as we were chatting beforehand, we don't have a mental health issue. It's a brain health issue. And so
Yeah.
how do we heal the brain in and amongst, all the noise out there, whether it's the noise of the food industry, whether the noise of the medication, the medical industry, just all the negativity coming at us, TV and social media and all those things. So I would love to dive into some of that and just kind of get your perspective on, what do we do?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing we need to do is shift the way we think and speak about our life. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is everything. Our thoughts and our words actually shift the biochemical makeup in the body. So we can be thinking positive thoughts and our biology will respond. We can be thinking negative thoughts, fear, and stress, and our biology will respond.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I work with a lot of people that say that they're struggling with anxiety, usually they're thinking about the future too much.
Mhm.
They're really worried, and this shows up in the body with having a hard time falling asleep, with some gut issues and stomach problems, digestion issues. So the body is constantly following what the mind is saying. So we have to
Mhm.
really pay attention to that. Also, I do want to recognize, because I've been there, where we get so exhausted and feel so bad that, like, this is where I was going to that doctor because I needed hope. Like, I thought this was what was going to heal me and save me from myself.
Right?
And so I do recognize that when we are not well inside, we sometimes become desperate and we do things that may not be the best, but we're doing the best we can with where we're at and what we know. So bravo to everyone who is listening to this podcast, because this is the thing. I didn't have access to this information, 20 years ago,
Right?
nor was I listening to people talking, to this capacity. So I
Yeah.
think it's a really beautiful thing. So when it comes to shifting the way we're thinking and speaking about your life, I always say it's important for us to recognize those downloads, those past programs. And so these are things in our past that we were going along life, and oh, I didn't see that coming. And
Hmm.
usually this happens when we're really young. And, for me, for an example, I remember I was in the second grade and I would read ahead when it was reading time. I would try to read ahead to like quickly learn all the big words because if I got
Oh,
called on, I wanted to be able to pronounce them so I wouldn't feel stupid. And then the teacher that day, I remember we were supposed to read and I read what she asked to read. And then she called on me to ask me a question. And I didn't know the answer to the question. And I remember her pointing her finger at me, pretty much, you're not going to amount to much if you don't read or you don't try, like all of this. And I remember my little second grade self downloaded in the background, you're not smart enough.
right?
And so from that moment, I started filtering the world because our brains will filter the world to validate the very things you're telling it. So I was filtering the world to see all the times that I wasn't smart enough. So I could be in conversations with someone like you, and
Hmm.
you would ask me a question out of curiosity and exploration and like just wanting to have a conversation with me. I, on the other hand, used to view it as you were challenging me. You were
Hmm.
questioning how smart I was. So when we have these past downloads, it can be, I'm not good enough. That's not available to me. I'm not smart enough. Um, I could achieve this, but I'm just going to end up failing, right? So we end up having all these downloads that impact how we think about our life, how we speak about our life, and how we view the world. And that's a huge place that we can start to shift because there's always a value gained from those experiences. And so when we can extract the value gained, that's when we get to step forward. So my value gained of that is number one, I will never, one, I'm never impressed by someone's education level. Number
Right.
two, I always want to have people feel like they're heard and have people feel like they're smart. And like when, like when I'm talking with people, I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. How could you even have done that, created that? So I'm so impressed by people and their minds and how they think and where they're at. So you're never going to find me being like, oh, you don't have a college degree? Geez,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm not hiring you or, it's so anyway, so that's the value gained from that. And I have a ton of, we all have those, a bunch of life experiences, but if we go back and take that value gain, that's when we get to step into what's good.
Right, right. And I know there's some people who are listening that are going to say, okay, so I need to change how I think, right? And to kind of dispel those past experiences. So, but I've been trying to talk positive to myself. I've been saying all the right things, looking in the mirror, all those things that you're supposed to do, and nothing's changing. Can you speak to
Yeah.
that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So the way we get out of this repetitive thought is we ask ourselves an open-ended question. So a lot of times when we're in this loop of negativity and we can't get out of it, we're actually coming from the limbic system of our brain, our amygdala, which is this fight or flight response. So when we ask ourselves, like, what if this wasn't true? What is possible in my life if this went away?
Hmm.
So if we ask ourselves an open-ended question, what it does is it forces us to come around and use our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive function thinking. And then we get to be in conversation about what's possible. So if someone is repetitive, yeah, well, I'll always struggle with my finances. Like my parents did, I'm always going to struggle. And it's just like this repetitive thing. Money doesn't stick around. This is where you get to say, okay, if money wasn't an issue, when I wake up tomorrow, what exactly would I do? What exactly would I spend money on? Like, how would I love to earn money?
Hmm.
So just there's no judgment. It's just being in these open-ended conversations about what's possible and starting to paint a new picture of a vision in your life because that starts to rewire new neural pathways. Because right now you have a strong neural pathway that you're always going to struggle with money and money's hard. So now if we can go and think about anything is possible, money is not an issue, and you play with that, you could start to rewire a new mindset. So those are just, some examples to do, but it's exercises for your brain.
Right. So how long does that take?
Oh gosh, well, it just depends. I think one of the most important things, and that's of true value, is getting a coach or a mentor.
Okay.
What I have found is after we get out of high school, after maybe college, after trade school, after being in the military, what happens is we stop having these mentors and we stop having these people push us to another limit.
So true, Anna Marie. Yeah.
So what, and then say you get your first job, right? This job that you're so excited about, you're like, oh man, and you did all those things to get that job. But then you find yourself a year, 2 years, like just blah, I don't even like this job, blah. And what really probably happened is you quit challenging yourself.
Hmm.
So I don't think we're even living close to the potential that we could all live. And
Right.
so when you get a coach, when you get a mentor, not only are they going to help you by giving you accountability and challenges and pushing yourself. The other thing that I do with clients that I think is like, this was an aha moment when I learned it. Most people are setting goals based on other people's expectations or society.
That's
They are not setting goals based on their true, authentic self. And
mm-hmm.
I'm a perfect example of that, of when I went to college and what I did in college, because what my dad told me to do. And, you
Right.
know, and then you wake up one day and you're like, I
Yeah.
thought I wanted this. Why am I miserable? Like, it's like, because you never wanted it to begin with.
Right.
So then it's like, what do we do next? Because I know for me, at 40 years old, I left an 18-year career to step into doing what I'm doing today. And so many people told me, oh my gosh, what are you going to do about
What are you gonna do?
insurance? How
Hmm.
are you going to replace your income? I mean, I had a really nice cushy, good job. I mean, I made my six figures, I had my retirement, I had the health insurance, all the things.
Right.
So when I was stepping away from that, it was very hard for me, by the way. I spent 2 years grappling with that, and it took my body getting sick
Sure.
because I wasn't in alignment and
Yep.
the stress for me to actually pull the trigger and say, I'm out and I'm stepping into what my purpose is. And now I'm like rocking and rolling and feel great.
I love it. That's so key. And I think fear really keeps us from doing that.
100%.
I mean, I'm just saying, looking back at my life, the times where, I argued with God, like you were saying, for 2 years. I'm like, I argued.
Yeah.
He's like, no, do it. I'm like, no, no, it's not good. It's not going to work out. He's like, hello, do I have your back? Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Right. And then, of course, then when you do it, like, oh, this works amazing. I'm kind of at that pivotal point right now with, even my practice and this podcast, all those kind of things, like
Yeah.
next step, like, do I do
Hmm.
it or do I not do it? So I understand what you're saying there. And it's so much fun on the other side. It's just that
Hmm.
crossing that little chasm there.
Yeah. Well, it's really stepping into who we're meant to be. And
100%.
a
Yeah.
lot of that programming that I was talking about has casted a shadow over that. And so when we do start to step into the person we're meant to be, it's met with imposter syndrome. It's met with who do I think I am? It's met with questioning ourselves. And it doesn't feel great.
No.
Most people will start backing off when things don't feel great in terms of the fear,
Hmm.
So it's like I always say, pick your hard. It's hard to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and go for the workout, go for the jog, do all the things. It's also hard to wake up and feel tired and be overweight and not have energy and be exhausted all the time. So it's like we all get to choose and we all get to pick the hard that we want in our lives. And I think most people, their wiring is off. So they're
Yeah.
choosing the hard that is actually making their life even harder.
Even harder. Yeah.
Hmm.
Definitely. I would love for you to kind of address, like, what do you mean when you and I were talking beforehand that, we're always talking about mental health issues in this country, mental
Hmm.
health, mental health, mental health. And what if it's not anxiety? What if it's not depression? What if it's more of just a brain health issue? So we're talking about speaking well to ourselves and, changing our thought processes. How do we destigmatize this mental health crisis and talk that goes on, 24/7?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it is a brain health issue. It's not a mental health issue. Also, we don't have anxiety. We don't have depression. These are things we're experiencing. So I encourage to change our vocabulary around even, what we're saying. Like I know with my kids, like there's them being even with their friends, it's like, oh, I have so much anxiety. Like when my daughter said that for the first time, she's like, oh, I just have so much anxiety. I looked at her and she's 12 and I'm like, Garrity. And she's like, oh, I know. Like my kids know
I
because
know.
of the practices that, we have. But you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. So if
Yep.
she's at school and she's hearing this stuff, it is going to filter over. So one of the interesting things that I learned is because my past was, the labels that were put on me were dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, and depression.
Hmm.
And it was more so the depression that uh, I think challenged me the most, that experiencing that.
Hmm.
But I didn't even know that we need the amino acid tryptophan and we need vitamin B6 to even begin to make serotonin in the gut.
100%.
And
Hmm.
a lot of our serotonin is made in the gut. So when I'm working with people and they have low mood issues, they have usually they're not staying asleep at night is another thing, or they're sleeping like all the time, they're exhausted.
Yep.
And say they stick out their tongue and their tongue is shaking.
Hmm.
These are all indicators that they have one, adrenal issues that are going on, and that they need some, and I'll test them for the Bs and for the tryptophan, that they need some type of supplement
Hmm.
protocol, some nutraceutical protocol. And so there are different raw materials, herbs and things like that that we use that we encourage people to start taking that actually start to shift how they're physically feeling,
Right.
which helps when we're working on rewiring the thoughts and rewiring the mind. It helps enhance that to make that stick. Right. So a lot of people that are struggling with like the anxiety, they're having a hard time falling asleep at night, gut things going on. Um, and so what we're doing is we're doing more like lemon balm, GABA. Of course, the bees are really important there, holy basil. So we're adding in different herbs in a very specific formula that can help them.
Hmm.
And then eating and exercising. You know,
Right.
if you have anxiety, it's not really great, or if you're experiencing anxiety, it's not really great to go do a HIIT, high intensity interval training.
Right.
Okay. Your nervous system is already taxed. So for those of you experiencing anxiety, let's try yoga. Let's try Pilates. Let's try a nice long walk.
Hmm.
People that are struggling with low mood and, struggling with emotions and experiences of depression, let's try HIIT training.
Hmm.
Let's try some different high intensity and play with that heart rate training. So, and the same with kids experiencing ADHD. Get that kid on that Peloton you have at your house for 10 minutes before they even go to school. If they're having a hard time focusing, get that blood flow up to the brain.
Right.
There's just so many things to consider, depending on your brain type. And so it's not a one size fits all, but there are some general things we can do. And when we're not doing basic foundational things to improve our overall well-being, um, to step into a medication, I think is just so dangerous.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we should be making sure we're doing foundational things first before we even look at or not nutraceuticals, but pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals, yeah. Because as you were saying before, your brain isn't developed until you're in your mid-20s. And so, we're putting 6-year-olds,
Oh, it's
on these
insane.
pharmaceuticals, and share with the audience, like, what is that doing to the 6-year-old brain? What is it doing to the 12-year-old, the 14-year-old brain?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we don't know. There's
That's what I wanted you to say. So thank you.
we don't fully
You have
know.
no idea,
It's all subjective. It's all based on their behavior,
right?
right? Just like, the medications adults are put on. It's subjective. It's based on behavior
Mhm.
and based on perception, because again, we can't measure brain chemistry. One thing we can do, which most people don't do this because insurance doesn't cover it, and I have training from the Dr. Amen clinics, and at the Amen clinics, what we do is I'll send people there and they'll do a SPECT imaging scan. So they're actually scanning the blood flow to the brain, and we're seeing where the blood is flowing and where it's not, which gives us a lot of good information. But also, what's really great about the Amen clinics is say you don't get the SPECT imaging scan, there is a laundry list of questions that can be asked to the client and to the parent that can actually kind of narrow in what type of ADHD or ADD do they have? What type of anxiety are they experiencing? What type of depression are they experiencing? And so that's the other thing is there's not just one type. And we're kind of doing this one size fits all when it comes to
Sure. Yeah.
medicine. And yeah, so I'm just like, let's take a step back because yeah, if you want to get me on my soapbox and get me going crazy, just tell me you're putting a kid on mind altering medications when they're not even 25 years old and I will lose it. But that happened to me. And thank God I was at least in my early 20s. I was like
Right.
22, 23. So I was almost there with the developed brain. I mean, I can't imagine, if I was medicated from a younger age. And again, there is a very small percentage of kids with the experiencing ADHD that I know from the Dr. Amen clinics. It will enhance their life if they have some type of medication intervention. And this is like very far few and in between.
Right.
And I'd like to give an example of, again, what I do as a traditional naturopath, we don't diagnose, we don't prescribe. But what we'll do is we'll help you with symptoms of and help you restore your foundations. So I had a child that I think he was probably about 10 years old. Divorced parents, one parent wanted to go the natural route, one parent wanted to go to the pharmaceutical route. And so they bring this young boy into me and I do a whole evaluation on him. And I'm curious is if we got this kid's inflammation down, systemic inflammation,
Yeah.
could this improve his behavior? Which I was thinking, yeah, so we could try these things. Well, then I suggested, you know what? For the parents that want the medical route, why don't we send you down to the Amen clinics and get a SPECT imaging scanned
Awesome.
to find out? Well,
Yeah.
what we found out, because this kid was about to get prescribed Adderall stimulant medication, the Amen clinics found that he had inflammation around his whole brain.
Wow.
And if you give a kid Adderall or any stimulant, when you have ring of fire going on with the brain, tons of inflammation, that's like putting gasoline on a fire.
Fire. Mm-hmm.
And you will literally, that kid's behavior will get dramatically worse.
Right.
So it's again, it's a game. Unless we scan the brain, it is a game. So I just always encourage before we go this mind altering medication route, what's possible if we looked at our foundations of health, our nutraceuticals, our sleep schedules, are we getting sunlight? Are we outside? Are we playing video games? How many fruits? How many vegetables? Like this is stuff we never used to think about. It was just how we
Just
were.
did it. Yeah.
Yeah, and now, but some people too, it's like, oh, well, that's just too much work. Like,
No,
okay,
I hear that a lot. Yeah.
and
I don't know if I can do that with my kid. I'm like,
yeah, you'd be
okay.
surprised. Kids are resilient. I always tell, I'm from a young age, I told my kids, you don't have to like it, you just have to eat it. You just have to get it in your body because your cells
Exactly.
need it,
Yeah.
so,
I
but
know
yeah,
mine too, because mine have, I mean, well, my son had McDonald's a couple times, but my daughter's never had McDonald's. I don't, she's like, I don't know if I've ever been through a drive-through that didn't include getting a green smoothie, you know?
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and so, everybody thinks that's like un-American, but you just
yeah,
grow your kids up that way and
yeah.
it's just normal for them. It
Pick
just
your heart.
is. And is it work? But yeah, it's just part of our lifestyle. It's not like
Yeah.
it's a burden by any shape or form.
Yeah, yeah, it's really it is pick your hard because
Yeah,
um,
I love that. I love
you
that
know,
saying, pick your hard.
yeah.
I'm
Yes,
gonna
it's
put that
okay.
up in my office, pick your hard. When
Yeah.
somebody says, oh, that supplements, those are gonna be too hard. I'm like, well, pick your hard.
Yeah. I mean, I have to tell myself it when I'm like, I get to my
Mhm.
office, usually after I drop off the kids, I come to my office. I usually have 30 minutes and then I go to this exercise class. It's like 4 blocks away. And sometimes I'll like get to working and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
that conversation, maybe I won't go to exercise class. Maybe I'll just get this done. And then you start justifying and give yourself all
Oh,
these excuses to
100%,
not
I
show up.
agree.
And then I always laugh at myself because I'm like, one, what do you teach people? And two,
Yep,
pick your hard because it's gonna be way harder to try to fit in 30 minutes later after you pick up the kids, bring them to their sports,
yep,
do all
yep.
the things. So it's like I even giggle at myself because it's that whole narrative in your mind where you're
Oh yeah,
like,
because it's
yeah,
easy. It's easy to get into that space because
yeah,
we're humans. So
yeah, totally.
my gosh. Yeah. What would you like to say to parents out there who their child has ADD or dyslexia or what depression, anxiety, they're experiencing those symptoms.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, number one, I feel like for the most part, they're gonna be fine. I mean, I just use myself as an example, a kid that, struggled with depression, a kid, an adult that experiences dyslexia all the time. I got to double check myself. Could I have ADHD, ADD tendencies? Probably, whatever. But, those are the things that have molded me and impacted the way I wound up being. And, it's worked for me because
Hmm.
I've worked through them. So, I would say to the parents, like, just talk to your child instead of trying to tell the children how to feel about things, ask them questions, so it's like, okay, like they're having behavior issues at school. Okay, what does that really even mean? Like, okay, what's going on with you, Tom, what's going on with you at school when this is happening? Like, what are you experiencing? How does that
Right.
make you feel? Like, getting curious and asking questions. I mean, I'm the mom that got called in for my daughter, who's 12 now, into her counselors as a kindergartner. And they didn't know what I was doing in my life. And they were like, yeah, we think she has ADD. And I'm like, I'm gonna stop you right there. Okay. And yeah, does my daughter have a tendency to like not hyper focus? And it's like we have to like be like, Garrity, like, yes, but I'm not going to hyper focus on that. I'm going to look at the good things that she's doing and how she is showing up in life because I don't know. I think that one, in our system now, how it is
It
formulated,
was designed, yeah.
how it's designed, I think that our system is designed to not allow kids to fully express themselves, not be active, not be how children are supposed to be.
Mhm.
And so with that, you are going to have kids that are going to be jumping around in their seat that aren't able to focus because the
That's
teacher,
normal. I mean, I would
yes,
say that it's normal. God bless all the teachers when they have 27 kids in their class and they have
yeah,
16 of them doing that. I understand the stress that
yeah.
has to be. Um,
But you get to change your curriculum. And I
right.
can say this, I was actually a teacher for 10 years.
Were you? That's amazing. Yeah.
So it's and granted, things are a little bit different now
Yeah.
than, when I taught, but it's like we need to do things differently. Like I just encourage everyone to show up in their life and quit being like everyone else. Like let's try things our own
Go
unique
outside that
way.
box.
Go outside that box. As long as you're not stepping over other people and inconveniencing other people so they can't be their true authentic self, just do the thing that you were sent here to do in the way you were meant to do it. And if
Hmm.
we all stayed in that vein, I feel like things would be way better. But, like where's that math teacher that's taking kids outside to do math calculations, or the science teacher that's taking kids, on a field trip around the campus,
Right.
to learn about science. So yeah, teachers are amazing people, but I feel like a lot of them are, becoming indoctrinated as well.
Hmm.
Um, and they feel like their hands are tied. I mean, I'm just talking from the teachers that I've talked to, and
Right.
every state is different. But
Yeah.
it's just like I just would love for people to step up and step out in their authentic way, um, you know, more so in this day and age than just like question the norm, I guess, is
Yeah.
where I'm at in
Yeah.
life.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we've been homeschooling. This is our 18th year of homeschooling, and my daughter's 18, my youngest. And that was one of the reasons, just so that we could be outside the box, so that they could just be who God created them to be and go towards their bent and their passion. And we've just always just let that happen. And it's been
Yeah,
amazing to watch that process, because they probably have some ADD, ADHD tendencies or whatever it might be as
yeah,
well. But I feel like that's part of their creative genius. And
yeah,
I love watching it. I think what they're
yeah.
going to be doing in life is amazing.
Yeah, and like whoever came up with the idea that not being able to pay attention to things you're not interested in, it should be a
I
diagnosis.
don't pay attention to things I'm not interested
Yeah,
in.
me neither.
I'm like, whether it's a lecture or a sermon or a
Yeah,
TV show
yeah,
or somebody you're talking to, you kind of zone out. And it's not that I
yeah,
feel like it's just because you're not interested, and it's hard to stay engaged, and we're expecting kids to stay engaged in something that means nothing to them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but if you want to figure out square footage of a horse stall, my daughter's all over it. But if you give her a workbook and tell her to figure square footage of somebody's random house in a workbook, she's gonna be like, I don't understand any of this. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I didn't actually realize how smart I was until when I got into college.
Mm,
And I remember I needed to study, and it was just like I would go to the library, I would like try to study in my dorm room. And then I had heard about some friends saying they were going to this cafe to study. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool to go to a cafe, but I'm like, it's loud there.
mhm.
Actually, because that we've been trained, everything needs to be dead quiet, dead
It's,
silent. And for some kids, like my daughter, needs it to be quiet for her to focus and do
mhm.
something. Okay. Again, every brain is different. I remember going to this coffee shop and I was there for 3 hours. It was so loud in there. There were people everywhere, and I was like able to focus and study. And I remember I was like, oh my, like I remember that street. I remember the university was right here. I remember where that coffee shop was because I remember I was like, oh my gosh. Like I had never been able to like focus and study for that long. Two
Uh-huh.
things there. One, it was something I was very interested in. And then two, for me, like I don't need quiet. I can like
Yeah.
I need chaos around
Yeah.
me.
You'll thrive better. There's noise everywhere.
Yeah, white noise is like so good for me. And I realize too,
Mhm.
like when I sleep, white noise everywhere. Like I have my fan going, I have the
Uh-huh.
air, the air filter going. So, I mean, yeah, we just got to discover like who we are and what
And
works
it's
for us.
okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah,
Love
that
it.
I haven't thought about that in a while.
That's so good because this is seem hopefully this is freeing for people to know that each brain is unique and we need to develop our what I want to say just our environment to enhance our natural abilities and our bents and all those types of things. And can we do it
Yeah.
all the time? Of course not. We're going to have to
Yeah.
be inside of a box every now and then. But for the most part, in our homes and who we choose to be friends with and those types of things, just finding out what we really, really love is going to make the biggest difference in our brain health for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
That's what we need to focus on.
I know. And it's hard for people to get out of it because they're like, what do I do
I
next? I'll lose my health insurance. I'll lose
I
this.
get it.
And I totally understand that. And it's just so amazing on the other side, though. So amazing.
Hmm.
Whenever I
Yeah,
have felt congruent, I just feel this like war with inside me all the time. And until you're like,
yeah,
I can't do this anymore. And then you move on, you're like, whew, that was
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, like when I left my career, I asked myself one question that made all the difference. I
Mm-hmm.
asked myself, if you're 80 years old, will you regret staying or will you regret leaving? And it gives me chills every time I think of that. So no matter what stage, what age you are in your life, if there is something that is tugging you and pulling at you, ask yourself that question.
Right.
If you're 80 years old, will you regret doing it, trying it, or not doing it, or not trying it, or not stepping into it? And if your answer is you will regret it if you don't, you have to do it. Like you have to do that for yourself. And yeah, so that's a huge question. And that's kind of to keep me in alignment with my authentic self. That's a powerful question I ask myself when I'm
Yes.
looking to make a change or do something. And it makes a big difference.
100%. I love that question. Any parting words you want to share?
Mm, I feel like that one was
That
asking
was
a
that
good
one was pretty
question.
good. So I don't know if we can top that one. So
Yeah, I think honestly, number one, there's no perfect way to be. There's no perfect parent doing all the things right. Like we're all perfectly imperfect. And just because it works for someone doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else. But it's our responsibility to be on the mission of curiosity and discovery about how we can show up in the best, most authentic way to evolve our soul and who we are in this world and our impact. That's on us. And so, if we can stay in that lane, it's really helpful and you will feel more free in your life.
yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Anna Marie. I appreciated
Yeah.
this interview. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and just being open and honest with all of us.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And thank you everyone who is listening. And I hope you love this. So make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And then I will see you in the next episode. God bless.